He's opinionated. He's unapologetic. He's always real. He is Brett Mason. This is the Brett Mason Show.
Well, hello there. Welcome into another podcast. My name is Brett Mason, host of the Brett Mason Show, and this would be another edition of the Liberty Report, where we discuss the state of liberty and freedom in the United States of America, something that decreases by the day and has been decreasing since 1913. If you don't know what's important about that date, I encourage you to Google it. I'd like to say thank you to everybody that's listening and by subscribing to the podcast. Of course, our podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and YouTube. So hello to you guys, and a special hello to everybody who's downloaded our free app. It's the easiest way to keep up the show. You get updated when a new show comes out. You can listen on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, whatever's most convenient for you. And that's a free download. Just search for Brett Mason Show. You can do that to find the podcast or to find the app if you're in the App Store or the Google Marketplace. Just search for Brett Mason Show. And if you don't want to search, you just want to click a link, and that's easier for you. We have the links to all the ways you can connect to us at brett-mason.com/connect. That's a hyphen in the middle, brett-mason.com/connect. So we have several things to get to on the show today. A couple of things that I've found both interesting and infuriating. One of them is a Republican governor who has proved that she's an idiot. I really hate that it's a woman because people are going to accuse me of being sexist, but trust me, there's just as many moron Republican males as there are females, so it's not a sexist thing, it's just an idiot thing. And we'll also be talking about the murder rates in America. What have they done compared to concealed carry in America? I'll just go ahead and tell you this. Concealed carry has basically tripled over the past few years. How has that affected the murder rates in the country? I think you'll find it interesting, and I think those who fall on the side of ultimate liberty and freedom probably already know the results of that, but we'll get into that later in the show as well. I want to start off with something that just absolutely has infuriated me. I think I probably watch too many YouTube videos. But just let me preface this by saying I'm by no means anti-law enforcement, anti-police officer. As a matter of fact, I think people who do that job honorably are some of the greatest people on the planet. And I know this from personal experience, first of all, because my dad did that his whole life. He started out as a dispatcher in the communications part of the sheriff's department. Then he wound up being a deputy. At one point, he was the chief deputy of the sheriff's department. Later on in life, he moved on to the correction system. And when he retired, I think he was a sergeant was his rank, maybe lieutenant, I'm not sure. His whole life was law enforcement, though, and I got to grow up and see that firsthand, and I know the sacrifices that are involved, not only for the person doing it, but for the family. Trust me, I know that firsthand. I know the toll it took on my mom and me. So I have the ultimate respect for people who do that job with honor. Unfortunately, it seems as if less and less officers are doing that job with honor anymore, and it really bugs me. If you can't trust your police officers, if you can't trust the people who have the power to shoot and kill you, who can you trust? So just let me say right off the bat that when I make statements about bad law enforcement officers, it just really bugs me. But the whole country's like this about anything. You mention racism and people jump to their point of view. You mention the Confederate flag, that's new. Everybody jumps to their side, they dig in and they staunchly defend it, and they're not intellectually honest. They're just not. And that really bugs me. When I say something about a bad officer or I say something about an ignorant officer, I'm not. If you're listening to this and you're a good officer, newsflash, I'm not talking about you. I'm just not. So there's no need for you to get offended. If you're the wife of a police officer and they're a good police officer, they respect the rights of the public, they do their job with honor, they know what the Constitution is, they honorably risk their lives to protect their fellow citizens every day. Guess what? I'm not talking about them. So there's no reason for you to get offended. There just isn't. There's no reason. But sadly, in my opinion, from what the evidence shows, there's an increasing number of officers who aren't honorable. In fact, some of them are downright thugs. And I think a part of that is because the law enforcement community as a whole has gone to a more military type thing. You don't have your local neighborhood peace officers as much anymore. You have people who are, like, matter of fact, some sheriff's offices, their officers don't even wear uniforms. They wear BDUs all the time. They wear a shirt that has the badge. What do you call? Oh God, now I'm going to sound like an idiot. But when they stitch something into the cloth, what is that called? Anyway, the badge is just stitched into the shirt. Like, they don't even wear a badge. They wear BDUs all the time, and they look like and act like, most of them, military. And then on top of that, a increasing larger and larger section of our law enforcement actually come from the military. So that's how they were trained. And again, don't get offended. I'm not talking about the military. The military are trained to do a job and do it well. Unfortunately, some of them don't transition from that into law enforcement and make the right transition. And really, it's not encouraged to make the right transition. They still treat it with an iron fist. I'm not taking any chances. We'll just kill people first and ask questions later. That happens. And so, again, if that's not you, I'm not talking about you, so don't get offended. So our clip today that comes from YouTube is a gentleman who was crossing a border patrol, a border checkpoint. And it's in Florida. And you may not be aware of this, but 100 miles from the coast or 100 miles from our border all around our country is basically what's called a Constitution-free zone. Now, it really isn't, but they call it that. And you can be stopped at any point in time. If you've never looked at a map, let me share with you what that means. If you live in the state of Florida, there's nowhere you can drive in Florida that you aren't subject to an immigration checkpoint. Because everywhere in Florida is 100 miles or less from the coast. This stretches all the way up into South Alabama, South Mississippi, South Louisiana, Texas, Arizona, California, all the border states. And they do more and more of them. What's funny is there's nobody on the actual border. We don't have enough people on the actual border, but we have buttloads of these checkpoints spread out, 100 miles from the border. So that's ridiculous on its face. So, they're really only allowed to do a certain number of things, and I've read the laws on them, what they're allowed to do. They're not allowed to, it has nothing to do with drugs, has nothing to do with any other thing. They're there to determine if you're illegally entering the country or you are in the country illegally, and that's really is the extent. Now, sometimes they can get special provisions to check for other things, but that has to be declared, it has to be signed off on. So, as a matter of course, their job is to try to catch illegal citizens. Now, generally, if you've watched video of these, when they go well, you'll pull up, they'll ask you if you're a U.S. citizen, they'll ask you where you're coming from, and most people answer those questions, and generally you get zipped through on your way. Sometimes they're just jerks about it. So this particular instance is a man who's crossed the border, again, in Florida, and the officer asked him a couple of questions. He asked him, where's he been, where's he coming from, or where's he coming to? And the guy answers the first 2 or 3 questions with no problems. And then it just gets ridiculous. He wants to know how many days you were at this place. And so finally the guy says, you know what, I'm just not going to answer any more questions. I'm gonna stand on my Fifth Amendment right. And this is where the video goes off in the weeds. The officer tells him, you don't have a right, you don't have a Fifth Amendment right, which is preposterous. And then, with quite some attitude, which we see all too often, he tells him he's going to get him, quote-unquote, squared away, which, you read between the lines, I'm about to tell you how it's going to be, regardless of what you think your rights are. He then proceeds to either lie or he's just ignorant. I don't know which it is. I assume he's lying, because the more officers I see say things that aren't constitutional they're either lying or they're ignorant. And I really hope that to be a police officer, you really have to be taught the Constitution. I'm starting to wonder if that's the case, though. I'm really beginning to wonder if that's the case at all. But he proceeds to tell him that he's not under arrest, so he doesn't have a right to remain silent. Now, for you to believe that, you would have to believe that the only time you can remain silent is when you're under arrest. Now, if that were the case, when officers were trying to get information or confessions or something like that, all they would do, they would just never arrest anybody. Because until they arrested them, they would be forced to answer questions, is what this cop's telling him. So it's preposterous on the very face of it, but anybody who knows the Constitution knows that it's complete BS. As you listen, and I'm going to play the audio for you, just hang tight. So as the audio goes on, and it's very short, so it won't take long. As the audio goes on, at some point, the officer then tells him, hey, I know you're a U.S. citizen, but blah, 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 blah. Now, look, once you've ascertained that the guy's a U.S. citizen, you send him on his way. Your mission is accomplished. But he doesn't quite see it that way. Now, I'm only going to share a short clip, but the video goes on. They pulled the guy over to the secondary. They made him wait, and I think his battery actually ran dead. You don't even get to see what eventually happened. I'm assuming they just ran the dog around his car, just harassed him, because that's what they do. When you don't play their game, that they're going to harass you. That's just what they do. So we'll listen to the clip right here, and then we'll talk a little bit about it more coming up right after it.
Do you have anything to declare?
Nope.
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 What were you doing at Juarez?
Visiting family?
How long were you there?
I don't know.
Okay, let me kind of square you away real quick. You have to answer our questions.
I don't.
Okay,
Actually, I have the right to remain silent. I'm pretty sure.
No,
of
you
that.
don't. You're not being under arrest. Be smart, man. You're
Listen.
being ignorant and dumb, bro.
Listen.
Okay?
No.
No, I know you're a U.S. citizen, but your right to remain silent, that's only if you're being arrested.
I have the right to remain silent at all times.
Hold on. In order for me to do my job, you answer my questions.
I am
And that's
answering
it.
your questions.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am. You just don't want me to give you details, and I don't have to give you details in my personal life.
Do you know my job?
No, but obviously you don't know yours either. I have the right to remain silent at any point in time while I'm being questioned by any officer.
Really?
Are you an officer?
Yes, I am.
Okay, then I have the right to remain
So you are
silent.
more ignorant than you look.
Oh, I guess so.
If that doesn't enrage you, then I would just submit that you're really not passionate about freedom and liberty. I was looking at comments on the video, and a lot of people were like, that officer was polite. That he never once did he get rude to you. Newsflash, just because somebody's polite doesn't mean that you have to surrender your constitutional rights. They're not even constitutional rights. They're God-given rights. The Constitution just ensures as a contract with you as a person that says we won't violate them. It recognizes that you have those rights. They come from your Creator, and we're not going to. We understand that, and we're not going to violate them. They're not rights given by the Constitution, which is another thing that people are confused about. So, it's and especially if you've read up on what the limitations of these checkpoints are. I mean, the guy starts asking all these questions about, it goes on and on after. I didn't play the whole clip, but you can go Google it. But it goes on and on about, how many family members were you visiting? What were their names? And just on and on the questions go. And this is after he said, look, I know you're a U.S. citizen.
I know you're a U.S. citizen, but your right to remain silent, that's only if you're being arrested.
So it's quite preposterous. It drives me insane. It makes me want to punch a wall. But I've grown out of that in my old age. Back when I was in my early 20s, I punched a few walls, but I've tried to grow out of that. Still to come, we're going to be talking about the murder rates as they are related to the increase of concealed carry permits and concealed carry in the United States of America. But I want to just move right briefly and instantly into another official of the United States of America who doesn't know anything about the Constitution.
Knowledge is sexy. This is the Brett Mason Show.
This is a big hullabaloo about over in Oklahoma where the judge ruled that the Ten Commandments had to come out of the, whatever it was, the courthouse or the property there, the grounds, state grounds. And Governor Mary Fallin, who's a Republican, announced that they're going to ignore the Supreme Court. We don't have to listen to you. It doesn't matter what you say. Forget the Constitution. Forget the separation of church and state. Forget how many people's rights were violating by having a religious emblem in the courthouse. Forget that. We're just going to ignore it. So, one of the local TV stations, the NBC affiliate, was interviewing the illustrious governor there, and the Republican governor Mary Fallin. And this is what Governor Fallin said. She said she believes the final decision on the monument's fate rests with the people. And here was her rationale, quote unquote, there are three branches of our government. You have the Supreme Court, the legislative branch, and the people. and the people in their ability to vote. So I'm hoping that we can address this issue in the legislative session and let the people of Oklahoma decide. Now, I don't even know how you can become a governor when you don't even know the most basics of the Constitution. Like, I think in elementary school they teach you the three branches of government. You have the executive branch, you have the legislative branch, and you have the judicial branch. You don't have the people. Look, that's not taking power. The people always have ultimate power, but they do it through the confines of the republic that we live in. And it's not a majority rule, something we've covered in other podcasts. We aren't a democracy. It isn't majority rule, and thank God it's not. If you think majority rule is a great thing, just wait till you're in the minority and see how much you like majority rule. You won't like it. So, the illustrious Governor Fallon believes the three branches of government are the Supreme Court, the legislative branch, and the people. Look, if you listened to last week's podcast, I'm going to just admit that I really got loud. I was mad. I was just raring to rip, snort, and curse a little. And I'm trying to take a more humorous approach to today's podcast because I think you can get the truth out there, and I think you can enjoy the humorous side of it and still be effective. I hope you can be effective. I hope that even though I laugh at this like it's funny, that if you're listening, you realize how atrocious it is that a sitting governor of a state in the United States of America thinks that the three branches of government are the Supreme Court, the legislative branch, and the people. Probably most interesting about that is the branch of government that she left out is her position. In her state, she is the executive part of the three branches of government. Nationally, for our nation, it's the president, and for each individual state, it's the governor. The governor is the executive branch. Then you have the state legislator is the legislative branch, and then you have your courts throughout the state, right on up to the state appellate court, which represents your judicial branch. That's the funniest part of it all. She doesn't even know that she's a part of the three branches of government. I laugh because I don't want to cry.
Love him or hate him, you know what you're going to get. This is the Brett Mason Show.
All right, here we go. Last topic for today's podcast. I'm going to continue to try to keep it light. I'm kind of proud of myself. I haven't launched into any kind of a flurry of obscenities and yelling and screaming. My throat isn't hurting like it was after the last podcast. So we'll try to keep it this way. If you've paid attention in the news at all since Obama took office, you know that it's caused a lot of things to happen. One of those things was just massive increases in sales of ammunition and weapons. People are so scared that your ability to buy a weapon or buy ammunition is going to be taken away that they started buying it. People who, actively exercise their Second Amendment right were just buying weapons, buying ammo. And another side part of that was the increase of concealed handgun permits. As a matter of fact, the year before Obama took office, there was about 4.6 million people in the United States who had concealed carry permits. That's now tripled to right at 13 million since Obama became president. So all these people that fear that the sky's fallen because of people legally carrying firearms, the statistics just don't back that up. As a matter of fact, the murder rates since that stat in 2007, the murder rates have fallen from 5.6 killings per 100,000 to 4.2, which is about a 25% drop. And this is according to the Crime Prevention Research Center. And the number of permits has been increasing every year. Over 1.7 million new permits were issued last year. That was a 15% increase over the year before. So it's just continued and continued. People who fall on the more liberal, more in favor of government regulation side of things that I talk to, often express their concern of what's going to happen when people are carrying guns. When you have everybody carrying guns, it's going to be like the Wild West. The thing I like to ask them is how well do you think the Wild West would have been if nobody was allowed to carry guns? You just had these wild bandits and thieves and crooks and murderers and stuff running rampant throughout the country in the Wild West. And the only people that had guns was the sheriff and his little couple of deputies in Dodge City, and that was it. It would have been ridiculous. Look, the police officers, your law enforcement aspect of the United States of America, it plays a role. Mostly an investigative role. That primarily should be the role. Prevention, two things. Prevention and investigation should be the roles of police and sheriff. Prevention by constantly canvassing neighborhoods, business districts, constantly being moving, keeping your eyes open. And the other part, staying in touch with communities, man. You should be knowing people. You should be stopping and talking to people and getting to know them and things, which doesn't happen, by the way. That just doesn't happen anymore. But because police departments are so militarized now, they're just looking for somebody to arrest, or they're looking for somebody breaking a law or not using a turn signal so they can stop them, and hopefully a dog will key on their car and they can search them and either get some drug money to fund their new Humvee they want to get, or some crap like that. And that's just not what policing should be about. But what it should be about is prevention, and that's by having a presence in the community, getting to know and talk to and gain the trust of as many people as you can, and the community working together, and a nice visual presence of law enforcement works on the prevention end. The other thing that law enforcement primarily is there for is the investigative process, and that is when someone is robbed, someone is murdered, someone is raped. Law enforcement is there, and they have the means to investigate and be able to determine who did it, be able to find that person, and then bring that person in so they can stand trial for the crimes that they're accused of committing. So, but law enforcement doesn't work like that. Let's just be honest. Law enforcement they're out there trying to write tickets. They're out there trying to stop as many cars as they can, and hope that they'll catch somebody with some weed, or somebody they can take to jail, because that's what they think prevents crime. And that's just it. The crime statistics prove that that's not true. They continue to use this heavy-handed, militarized approach, thinking it'll bring crime down, and it just doesn't. Because that's not what needs to be done. But I'll digress. Maybe I'll do a podcast on that one day. But people should be empowered to react to things as they happen, and that's where the right to arm yourself comes in. If you're walking from a building, say you went into some place at 7:00 at night, and let's say you went into the gym, and as you left the gym and you're walking across the parking lot to get in your car, some thug comes up to you with a knife and demands to have your wallet and your watch and all your valuables and stuff. Police are not going to be able to help you in any way right then. There is nothing, unless a police officer happens to be parked right next to where this happens, there's nothing that police can do about that. The only person that it can affect that is you. And that's why in America we have a right to defend our life, liberty, and our property, and we are allowed to do that by being armed. And let me tell you something. A lot less people are going to come up to you with knives if they know that most people have a .357 or 9mm 45 or something on their hip. They're just not going to come up to you with a knife. The knife loses that most of the time. If they can get close enough quarters to you to inflict some damage before you can get it, then yeah. But other than that, gun wins. And then less people are going to stick a gun in your face, because honestly, most crooks don't want to kill somebody. They just want to scare the crap out of you. Now, some of them do. And for the ones that do, it really doesn't matter if you're armed or not. They're just going to kill you. So there's no argument there that makes any sense. But if you're actually armed, and people who are like this know that most people are armed, and you just don't, it's really a crapshoot as the next person you decide to violate them is armed or not, you're really not going to go that route. Crooks are like wild animals. Wild animals in the wild, when they are looking for food, like tigers and lions and stuff. When they start chasing a big herd of antelope or something like that, they always try to separate out the weak one, the young one or the weak one. Crooks are the same way. Crooks go after the easy targets, the low-hanging fruit. That's why they love convenience stores so much. There's really nothing that the poor guy in the convenience store can do at 2 o'clock in the morning. They're in there by themselves. There's nobody around. There's no witnesses. Videotape might be rolling, but you're long gone by the time somebody finds out what happened. And so that's low-hanging fruit. And gun-free zones, like this just really sad and unfortunate incident that happened at this recruiting office this week, which was just tragic. That's easy. When they know there's nobody there who's armed, there's no recourse when you go there and open fire. You know that the police are not going to be there for 3 to 5 minutes in a place where there's good response time, and in towns and areas where it's bad. It could be 10, 15 minutes. You just don't know. Well, you can kill a lot of people in that amount of time. But now, on the other hand, if you know that 80% of the people walking around that shopping center are armed, the military recruiters that are in the office are armed, you're probably not going to pick that as your target. And so the less targets we have, the less crime we have. It's simple math. The less easy targets you have, the less crime you have. So I'm not surprised by these statistics at all. Look, I'm going to link articles to all these stories. They're always on the page. So if you go to brettmason.com, there's a dash in there, brett-mason.com. Maybe you've clicked through from the Facebook page, or maybe you just found us on the podcast. You found us on the app. You can go to the website, and you can always find the page that has this podcast on it. And if you want to see the links, the link to the video that we started out with, or these articles that I've read, I'll always have the links there for you so you can follow up. And again, that's brett-mason.com. And I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. I don't know if you appreciate or don't appreciate my ability to keep a low-key this time, not scream and yell till I lose my voice and throw a few obscenities in there and call anybody a douche nozzle. But I personally am very proud of myself for not calling anybody a douche nozzle on today's show. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Have a fantastic day. Give me liberty. Give me liberty.
You can subscribe to the podcast, download the free smartphone app, and find more ways to connect to the show at brett-mason.com/connect.